I'm new to the cellular agriculture space, but I'm not new to cutting edge and bleeding edge technologies. And that's why I love it. I need twice as much meat to support the human population the way we're consuming it now in the next 20 to 30 years. And the problem with that is already 1/3 of our land is consumed with agriculture and farming. So the math doesn't pencil.
Just take a minute and talk about things that might be less exciting. And that would be things like regulatory backlash. There's some news out of Florida in the very recent past about banning lab-grown meat.
I think every burgeoning industry or new industry is going to see some sort of backlash. It doesn't matter what it is. We certainly saw it in crypto. We saw whole countries and nations come out and say, we're banning crypto, we're banning Bitcoin. And in my mind says that means you're on people's radar. You're not so small that you're not relevant anymore. You're on people's radar. With Cult, there's going to be challenges, I'm sure, as the company grows and expands. We could be in the human market at some point.
All right. Well, Mark Binns, thank you very much for sharing some of your valuable time with me. We're here to talk about a relatively small company that's gaining some traction recently, almost being revived, is Cult Food Science, operating in the cellular agriculture space. Could you just go ahead and give me an overview of what Cult is and what the business model is and where it came from?
Yeah, Bill, for sure. Thanks for having me today. Excited to be here to talk about Cult. Cult is a cell-based food company, and I'll explain what that means. We're really a food technology pioneering company wanting to deliver the world's first cellular agricultural products and brands. And if you think about what is cellular agriculture, it's growing meat products primarily in a lab environment by starting at essentially the DNA level. So actually growing real meat, but not growing, a cow the traditional way. It's actually, you could take a feather from a chicken and put it in one of these huge bioreactors and essentially feed it nutrients and everything that, meat is requiring to grow and end up with a chicken breast. Or it could be end up with hamburger. But it is real meat at the cellular level. It's not a plant-based alternative. And this company is pioneering that space. And I should say that the first real revenue focus for Cult is going to be in the pet food space. And we'll talk about that a little bit as we go.
Yeah, I think that's a clever entry. Just to give a clear background, and you can correct me if my understanding is incorrect. Cult started out effectively as an investment issuer, and it was a publicly traded company that gave investors access to many of the private venture capital companies that were working in the cellular agriculture space. And that was really hot in the 2018, 2019, 2020, and even early 2021 years when interest rates were low and everyone was looking for what could be the next gigantic industry to grow. Sort of fell on some hard times as interest rates rose, but interest is coming back, and we'll talk about that later, with bigger investments coming in from major well-known guys like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates. But there's been a flip now, which I really like, and maybe you can touch on it, is trying to leverage the technologies of those portfolio companies to have a consumer goods revenue generating arm of the business. So now it's not just an investment issuer, but an investment issuer that has consumer goods to generate revenues from those portfolio companies' technologies.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So the company raised somewhere in the range of, I think, $7 million when, pre-public and going public, and invested in a range of around 19 different companies in the cellular agricultural space. And those companies do everything from, make different components of the food chain, and they make different products. Like one of them is involved in basically making like lab-grown chocolate, right? And some of them are more on the meat side. But the portfolio is amazing. And we have these positions in these 19 companies. Some of the companies are doing really well, as you'd expect in a broader portfolio. Some of them are maybe struggling to find their footing. But we can use all of these companies as basically partners in any product. And we have one of the companies we own 90% of, and we operate, is called Noochies. And Noochies is a pet food brand. And the plan to bring cellular agriculture and lab-grown meat into these dog foods and cat foods products that Noochies means are selling can come from other portfolio companies. So we can actually get ingredients from portfolio companies that we've invested in. So we don't have to go out and spend millions of dollars on our own lab production. Instead, we work with these partners, which are actually companies that we own ownership stake in, and put their products into our Noochies product in order to sell it into the pet food space.
Yeah, this is a sort of investment strategy that I hear about or see a lot in, for example, the real estate market. You have an asset and you just force appreciation by generating revenues from it. And now you can go across the board to any investor, sector agnostic, and say, look, these investments are generating these sort of revenues or supporting this sort of business. And it's a nice leverage effect to have a consumer facing good now that can leverage the technologies that you've invested in, because now you're not only going to generate value in the consumer goods brand, but that's going to funnel value into the portfolio companies by showing that there are marketable products from their existence and from the research that they've done.
Yeah, all the portfolio companies generate revenue when we use their products, right? And then their value goes up, and therefore the value of our portfolio of these companies goes up simultaneously, while we have our own products that we're selling directly to consumers generate revenue. So you get a portfolio value, and then we'll get a multiple on the revenue that we generate as well directly with our products. So it's a win-win on both sides.
Yeah. Have you been in the cultured food space or the cellular agriculture space along, or what is your professional history?
Yeah, so I'm new to the cellular agriculture space, but I'm not new to cutting edge and bleeding edge technologies. And that's why I love it. I'm sort of a tech guy originally, computer science degree, first business degree, did my MBA, and then I wanted to get into spaces that I thought were leading technology spaces. And one of the big ones that I got into early was crypto. And I ended up being the CEO of a fledgling little new company in 2017 called Netcoins. And this is when nobody understood crypto or how it worked. You usually had to wire money to Japan if you wanted to buy Bitcoin. And we said, okay, there is a huge opportunity here to build, a Canadian exchange, something local, something easy to use. This is a big market in the making, essentially. And let's be ahead of the curve. And everybody thought, I don't know what Mark is doing. I don't understand that space. Nobody uses that. It's really early days. But I believe that's when all the wealth is created in an industry. I remember Hive went public first in the crypto space in 2017 in Canada. It was one of the first companies to do it. And it went from like 30 cents to $6 once people started realizing that these guys were ahead of the curve. And then we did the same thing with Netcoins, eventually became big digital assets, went from pennies a share to many dollars a share because we were ahead of the curve. And that's when I saw Cult and I said, this is the same thing. This is an industry that there's a huge need for going forward, cellular agriculture. Nobody knows a lot about it yet. Some big names are starting to put money into it, like you mentioned, Bezos and Bill Gates. And here's a company that's already gone public, has an incredible portfolio, and hasn't taken off yet at all. So the opportunity is tremendous. So that's why I got involved with Cult, and I'm really excited about where they are, where the industry is right now, and all of the upside potential.
Right. So to be clear, you came on as the capital markets advisor. What is your role there? And again, I guess you can touch on why Cult, although you just did, if there are any other reasons you missed.
Yeah, well, there's lots of reasons. I am a capital markets advisor to the company, and my job really is to help them navigate the capital markets, which means figure out how to get the story out, right? Make sure people know what Cult is doing, how it should be valued, where they're going, and what the investment opportunity is. I have a very diverse network in Canada and the US of both investment advisors, stockbrokers, family offices, high net worth individuals, investment funds, et cetera, plus investment bankers that along the way are valuable for making introductions to all the above mentioned groups and potentially doing financing as needed if we see opportunities in the space that require more investment. So yeah, my job is to really help the company navigate the public markets and grow on the public side, because every public company, you have to have the operating business. It has to do well, but people need to know about it because that's your capital. Your stock is your capital, and I'm going to help them do that along the way here.
I understand. You touched on a couple of parallels with the crypto industry just being early stage of a potentially extremely large market. How do you see Cult like in comparison with some of the early stage crypto companies and the industry as a whole of the cellular agriculture parallels with the early days of the crypto industry?
Yeah, I mean, in the crypto industry, I honestly felt like the financial services industry and money was to some degree broken, right? And would have to be, there has to be another solution than fiat currency, which is being devalued by inflation constantly. And that's where I saw crypto and Bitcoin as an actual solution. In the lab grown meat industry and the cell ag industry, I've heard stats that we need twice as much meat to support the human population the way we're consuming it now in the next 20 to 30 years. And the problem with that is already 1/3 of our land is consumed with agriculture and farming. So the math doesn't pencil. It's impossible to scale the required meat production for humans on Earth over the coming decades. And the answer, cell grown, lab grown meat, is one of the obvious answers to this, is a way to find with a much smaller footprint, a much more environmentally friendly footprint to actually produce food that is needed on planet Earth. And you can start with pets, where we're starting in terms of big scale, because another stat that I've heard is that people spend 7% of their money on their children, essentially raise them, and 6% on their pets. The pet food industry is giant and consumes a large amount of meat every year. And if we can even start there by replacing some of those products with cellular agriculture, that's going to be good for planet Earth and good for sustainability. And then as the industry evolves, do the same for humans and human consumption. So I saw, a very direct parallel to the broader need for crypto and again, the broader need for lab grown meats essentially. And then I also saw the parallel in the companies. So, Netcoins, big digital assets in the early days, we were a small company, a small team with, good, smart people and good ideas, but, a very small market cap, right? And basically a startup. That's where I see Cult right now. They're a great team. They've got great investments. They got great products. They have good people. Mitchell Scott is a seasoned CEO behind the company, and they have all the pieces in place now to go execute and really create value for shareholders. So I love seeing that for them as well.
Yeah, the sustainability of the human race of producing enough meat is certainly an important topic. And the pet food industry is in fact huge. Just touch on one other point is the ethics of factory farming and say the vegan pet food market, which I imagine that cellular agriculture-based pet products would satisfy the ethical requirements of many pet owners that are looking for vegan products, which is, I have some notes here. The global pet food market now, or last year, was over $120 billion. And the vegan pet food market in less than 10 years is going to be $70 billion. And who knows where it actually ends up. That's just the projected growth rate now. But my observation of the boots on the ground is this is growing extremely fast. I just came back from a friend's house where the dog treats I could give his dog were made from like peaches and pears.
Yeah. No, I have friends and family that are vegans and they have pets and they don't want to feed their pets meat because they don't eat meat themselves, but they don't have good alternatives, right? And their reasons are they don't want to be, killing cows and damaging the earth, with methane they produce, et cetera. But cats in particular, I understand, need meat in their diet. So Cult is working on specifically first launching a cat food product that has this lab grown meat that is directly appealing to this vegan market. It's not animal grown meat, but it does give the nutrients and the food required for their pets, and they can, I guess, sleep happy at night. But the market is big, and once it's available and people see it, I believe the market will get way bigger, right? Once people even understand this is available, they will switch, right? And they will move to this kind of product.
Right. So the first consumer facing brand is Noochies, and that is both dog treats and cat treats.
Yes.
And these are a cultured yeast, so very similar technology, but there's no actual animal cells in those treats for now. And then the next products will be incorporating actual cultured meat, like you're talking about for cat food or cat treats.
Yeah, the exciting part is Noochies is already in, I believe, about 40 stores in California. It's available direct to consumer in the US and just about a week ago launched direct to consumer in Canada. So the product is already being bought and it's out in the market. And that is getting a head start for the FDA approvals to put the lab-grown meat into the products. And the first one is the cat treats. The brand is going to be called Marina Cat, and it's basically a lab-grown snapper, as I understand it, that's going to be going into this. And the feeding trials is what you do for FDA approval. You actually feed the product to cats in this particular case for somewhere in the 20-22 week range under vet supervision, et cetera, and make sure that, they're healthy, there's no side effects, and everything goes well, which is exactly what we expect. So they are, getting ready to go into these feeding trials, which is going to be, a huge catalyst for the company to actually be one of the first, actually, we hope to be the first company in the United States to get FDA approval for lab-grown meat in pet food, and specifically first this cat product called Marina Cat. So that is the other thing I was going to say. We talked about things that get me excited and reasons for getting involved. That reminds me of crypto when regulation was coming in. It was time to go and be a leader and get regulated and approved by the CSA to run a crypto exchange. That brought huge value to our company, the same way this is by having a leadership in the regulatory space for Noochies with a cat food for FDA approval or becoming FDA approved.
Right. So in the past, when Cult was just an investment issuer, the overhead for operating the business is very low, right? You just need a team that's doing due diligence and researching into the companies that you're going to invest in that have some potential. Now that you have a consumer packaged good and a brand where you're going to have to manufacture and distribute, how does that affect the overhead of the company? And I know you guys just raised $800,000 a month or two ago. Is that enough to get you to where you need to go to operate this business?
Yeah, so 800,000, we did just raise it. We're doing another raise of 2.5 million currently in the market, which is being received very well. And part of that for sure is to move forward the marketing of the Noochies brand, getting into the world of pet influencers and getting the product out in front of people where they pay attention to cat food. We're also working with Pet Valet and distributors to get the pet food available in your usual online channels like Amazon and Target and things like that. So we're really excited about those initiatives. And again, being in market and being sold, and then being able to incorporate the lab-grown meat products, we're already ready. But on costs, we don't produce it ourselves. So smartly, Cult is using basically third-party manufacturers that do on-demand production. And as stuff is sold, it can be produced in batches, of course, but we don't need to build a whole factory ourselves. And we don't have to produce the ingredients, as we talked about, because we have the portfolio companies that actually can provide us with the ingredients that go into the Noochies product in real time as they're needed. So we got the proper outsourcing of production, the proper outsourcing of the meat, the lab-grown meat products that are going to go into it. And then, it's just marketing dollars, and we will spend marketing dollars as the product volume scales. So it can be done appropriately as we go here.
I see. So yeah, with the existing products, it's just marketing dollars. I agree. That's very clever, minimizing the overhead. What about bringing new products online? Is this a huge expense? Is this millions of dollars to launch, say, Marina Cat with the trials and sourcing the cell, what's the word I'm looking for, scaffoldings that you need to start producing the cat treats or the cat food with the actual cultured meat in it?
Yeah, I mean, there is real costs for sure, but the company has it budgeted. Mitchell Scott, the CEO. He's done all this before. He was a CEO of Very Good Butcher and took basically consumer products to market, built the brands, got the distribution. He knows exactly how to do it and how to scale it properly and have the relationships, which is a huge part about him being in that seat and leading Cult going forward. But, again, the money can be invested as sales rise. I know that there's multiple new SKUs being developed for Noochies, but that's really Mitchell and his team in-house that are already there coming up with new ideas and new branding, essentially. It's all within a reasonable scale and can be done pretty quickly.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed and excited when we saw Mitchell come on board. You mentioned Very Good Butchers. For people who aren't familiar, this was a vegetarian butchers, if you will. They had extremely good products. Also, I was purchasing them from before the time the company went public. But its experience in marketing to a very similar audience, especially if that's his main role, like is the people who are interested in ethically sourced, like non-factory farmed sources of protein. It seems like an extremely good fit for Cult and their go-to-market strategy, given that he's already had experience in marketing extremely successfully to a very similar demographic and having that marketing go completely viral. I don't know how fast Very's sales grew, but it was meteoric for a time there in 2018, 2019, maybe 2019, 2020. Is that timeline right?
Yeah, I would say it's around the 2020 timeline, 2019, 2020, 2021. I mean, Mitchell talks about sales going from 1 million to 5 million to 10 million. They grew very, very quickly. And you're right. He has literally built a brand and sold products in what I would call the non-traditional meat space, right? And whether it's, the plant-based products or cellular agricultural products, it's selling to an audience that's looking for a solution that is not the traditional meat market. And Mitchell has done it successfully, and I know he's fired up to be doing it here again.
Okay. So you've raised 800,000. There are some warrants along with it that should bring in another similar amount. You've got 2.5 million now and some old warrants. Is it possible that you'll never need money again, or what's the plan here? Is it to grow and grow the capital base along with it, or try to grow organically from here, given the cash base you have?
I mean, right now we're looking at it as this might be the last raise that Cult ever does. It's certainly possible, but as with all things in business, if the products take off and they hit, a viral growth level, it would make sense to raise more money. So raising more money as the opportunities present themselves and say, listen, raising that capital would give our shareholders an excellent ROI and an excellent use of capital, then we would raise more money. But the idea is to get ourselves in a position where we have enough capital. There's great warrant coverage all the way up at different prices from early financing that will bring in more capital as well. But as mentioned, you're always got to be nimble in this space and in capital markets. And if there's an opportunity to take in capital and deploy it for a higher ROI than it's cash based, then that's what the company would do. So right now we're good. This will get us a long way. But if something jumps out at us and we say, hey, that's a good use of money, then we could raise more in the future.
Yeah. Just take a minute and talk about things that might be less exciting. And that would be things like regulatory backlash. There's some news out of Florida in the very recent past about banning lab-grown meat. Where exactly are the industry regulations right now? And what sort of timeline do you see them evolving on? And how does that affect Cult's business strategy?
Well, first of all, I think every burgeoning industry or new industry is going to see some sort of backlash. It doesn't matter what it is. We certainly saw it in crypto. We saw whole countries and nations come out and say, we're banning crypto, we're banning Bitcoin. When I was in the space, China said we're, killing crypto. And in my mind says that means you're on people's radar. You're not so small that you're not relevant anymore. You're on people's radar. You're getting their attention. And that's actually creating some media exposure and getting some mainstream media. So, that's where the lab grown meat space is right now. We're definitely, as an industry, we're getting on people's radar, government's radar. People are starting to pay attention. And I think that's generally good. Now, you also see investment coming into the space from, industry titans like we talked about, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, et cetera. And what usually happens is cooler heads prevail, right? As an industry starts growing up, people realize, and they can be educated on, for example, the safety of lab grown meat and actually its advantages over, having a cow in a farm that's exposed to pesticides and living in slop, whatever the case might be. And then people will slowly come around and say, oh, okay, that actually makes sense. In Bitcoin, people wanted to kill it. Now the US government has, allowed ETFs to actually sell it. So you start somewhere and you grow, you get exposure to people, you get education in front of people, and then the industry can keep growing. And that's exactly where Cult is. I mean, the impact on Cult currently is non-existent. We have great products. We're working on regulatory approvals we talked about for pet food. The government has not said anything about this being an issue. They just want it to be safe. And that's the same way with ETFs and crypto. The government says, well, if people are going to buy it anyway, let's make it safe for them. So let's package it up in a traditional financial vehicle. With Cult, There's going to be challenges, I'm sure, as the company grows and expands. We could be in the human market at some point, and then there'll have to be, I'm sure, complicated and long regulatory approvals. But if it's meeting a public demand and a demand that is needed by society, and it's not, negatively affecting, hurting, killing people, all of those different things, it will find its way through the process. And, states that may ban it may come back and change their mind in a few years. It happens all the time in regulatory spaces. So I don't see any issues. I think it's normal. I think it's healthy. And in fact, right now it's giving exposure to the whole industry through media.
Yeah, yeah. Regulatory approvals for human consumption would be huge for any company that has a foothold in production. And the go-to-market strategy of Cult with pet food seems very clever. What are there regulatory differences there? Is the pet food market less regulated than the human food market? I guess it wouldn't be possible to sell some of the products that you have for human consumption, but they're totally fine for pet consumption.
Yeah, they're fine for pet consumption, but we still need the approval. The difference is, to my understanding, it's like a 22-week, trial for pet consumption, right? There's no way a human consumption thing is gonna, approval is gonna be done in 22 weeks. It'd be longer, more expensive, more similar, for example, to bringing a drug to market. But in the pet food space, in Canada, this is like crypto in the early days too. It's not even clear what the regulatory framework is. It's more like go talk to the regulators and say, here's what we want to do. We want to sell this to pets. What do you require? And some regulators may say, we don't know. We need to think about it. No one's ever asked us that before. And that happens all the time in new industries, but in the US, the conversations we have sound like it's going to be a few months of trials and not 6, 12, 18 months of trials, right? Which could be for human consumption. So the whole framework, the regulatory framework is evolving, and every country's different. And a lot of them don't even have a framework in place yet, or they haven't thought about it. So the one we're really focused on right now is pet in the US, and we understand what we need to do there.
Yeah. And for the time being, you have the current Noochies products, which are the yeast cultured that you're already going to market with. Sales just started on those. Is it just in the last few weeks you've kicked up distribution and a marketing program?
Yeah, I mean, the product existed. We bought the product. Essentially, it was in market, but there was no marketing dollars at all behind it. So when we did the raise recently, the $800,000, we did two things. We just started putting marketing in place that's just been launching. You're just starting to see these pet influencers and marketers pick up the brand. And we opened up Canadian distribution. Cult's a Canadian company. We have shareholders here that want to buy the product and are asking us, well, how do I get it in Canada? So we've just opened that up. So it's absolutely early days in terms of selling the product, but it's going out the door now.
Great. Yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I guess we're roughly 3 months away from any quarterly financials to know
That's
how
right.
this initial marketing push goes, but there's a possibility of having significant liftoff even before any approval to get cultured meat into the products.
100%. Yeah, we don't need lab grown meat in the products in order to really start scaling revenues at this point. That's sort of the next step in opening up, what could be a much bigger, faster growing market. But absolutely, we're in the market and selling now.
Okay. Is there anything that you're particularly excited about or want to share that we haven't covered yet in this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, just sort of in wrapping up and closing the stuff that get me excited about the company, there's real catalysts, right? You talk about revenue catalysts, you talk about portfolio companies and things that they could do. There could be exits in portfolio companies that give us a windfall of cash or investment in another company. There is FDA approvals that we're going to be working on. There's a lot of things that this company is doing that provide real catalysts to shareholders. They have a real team. We talked about Mitchell, proven leadership, a very dedicated shareholder base. I've met a lot of the major shareholders since coming in. They're here for long-term investment, long-term value appreciation. The company's early in the industry, talk about first mover advantages. We talked about some of the reasons earlier, but that gives you an outweighed opportunity to create value, right? Scarcity of a stock in the lab grown space. We are the only one in Canada that I know of, and maybe one of 3 in North America. And wealth is created by being ahead of the curve. So yeah, those are the things that get me excited about the company. And it's early days, and we get up every day and go out and keep building.
Yeah, being the only portal for the retail investing public to access this investment industry, this sector is exciting. And I think just to add a thing that comes to my mind is you can have a real activist investor base behind a company and product like this. And they invest for different reasons just to support. And well, that can be very significant because those shares just get completely pulled out of the float and on lockdown.
Yep, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Where you get people that are passionate about the industry, and that's why they want to be invested, and they want to be invested to get access to 18, 19 different companies in the space through Cult as well, right? And they'll, yeah, take those shares and tuck them away because they want to be long-term owners of a company making a difference in this space.
I will link to the website where folks can buy the products and also where they can find out more about Cult and what the business strategy is, as well as a document that has the information about the portfolio companies for those who are interested in what exactly you're gaining exposure to if one were to decide to invest in Cult. Are there any other sources that we should provide for anyone who's interested, where else they should look or go?
No, I think you got them covered, but that's everything people are going to need.
Awesome. Well, Mark, thank you very much for your valuable time. And I look forward to keeping track of how Cult progresses here in the next couple of quarters.
My pleasure, Bill. Good to be here.